Norma, is your Doris pregnant by any chance? Sue, the neighbor, peered into the backyard as she saw Norma hanging up laundry. What nonsense are you talking about? Norma snapped, annoyed. Doris stays home all day, she doesn't even go outside. Well, she's gotten quite chubby, Sue smirked. What are you feeding her? You're so mean, Norma glared at her neighbor. Just because you're skinny doesn't mean everyone should be. My Doris is a beautiful girl, and look at me, there's something to hold on to, she patted her sides. I'm happy my daughter has a good appetite. Well, just watch out, Sue shook her head. Your Doris might surprise you. Norma resumed hanging the laundry, then hurried back into the house. Doris was lying on the bed, holding a textbook in one hand and a cookie in the other. Someone told me you're pregnant, Norma laughed, looking at her daughter, expecting they would laugh together at what the neighbor had said. But Doris looked terrified, tossed the textbook aside, buried her head in the pillow, and started sobbing loudly. So, it's true. Norma gasped. When? You haven't been seeing anyone, as far as I know. Tell me, who's the father? Norma grabbed a towel off the hook and snapped it at her daughter. Mom, that hurts, Doris got off the bed and ran to the far corner. It's not my fault, it just happened. Not your fault. Norma glared at her daughter angrily. So whose fault is it? Or did you have an immaculate conception? Tell me immediately who the father is, and I'll deal with him myself. He's not from around here, Doris stood with her eyes lowered. I don't even know where he lives. Did he force you to sleep with him? Norma gasped again, covering her mouth with her hand. We should report this to the police. They'll find that scoundrel. No one forced me, Doris pouted. He said he loved me and if I gave in to him, you know, he'd consider me his wife. How could you be so foolish? Norma threw up her hands in despair. Your older brothers are so smart, graduated from college, made something of themselves, and you. She furrowed her brow. So who is this husband of yours? Do you remember when those managers from the factory came to visit our farm? Doris sat back down on the bed. School was cancelled, and we were sent as volunteers to that meeting. That's where I met Terry. I liked him right away, and he liked me too. When did you manage to sleep with him? Norma looked at her daughter skeptically. You didn't go on dates with him, you spent all your evenings with me. Or did you sneak out through the window when I was asleep? Doris silently nodded. You little rascal, Norma smacked her knee with her palm. Wait, she thought for a moment, was it when they came in September? So that means you're due in 2 months. How did I miss this? I was just happy you had a good appetite, but you were eating for 2. What about school now? Well, you'll finish it somehow. But you wanted to go to the city, to college. Oh, daughter, you've ruined your life. Maybe Terry will come back, and I'll marry him. Doris asked uncertainly, looking at her mother. He said he had never met a girl like me. He called me beautiful, his love, whispered sweet things in my ear. You're such a fool, Norma said. Guys always say things like that to get what they want from girls. And you believed him. Where is your Terry now? Gone, as if he never existed. And you'll be left alone with a baby in your arms. Who will want you then? Oh, come on, Mom, Doris said nonchalantly, taking another cookie from the plate. You had Mel early too, at 18, and you said you were already pregnant when you married Dad. But I had all of you within marriage. Besides, I never planned to study further, I was happy living in the village. You had all opportunities ahead of you, and you threw them away. Now what will people in the village say about us? How will we face them? Oh, Mom, stop it, Doris grimaced. What's the big deal? So I had a baby, big whoop. They'll gossip for a while and then forget about it. Doris went outside to escape her mother's nagging. She turned her face to the warm spring sun and closed her eyes. Finally, her mother knew everything and didn't even scold her too much. The baby had already started moving, and Doris had been doing her best to hide it from everyone. Fortunately, she had always been a bit chubby, so no one paid much attention to her belly. If it weren't for the neighbor Sue, no one would have found out about Doris's pregnancy. What she would have done with the baby and how she would have told her mother, Doris hadn't thought about. She didn't want a baby at all. What Doris wanted was love, sweet words, and passionate embraces like the ones she had with Terry. Norma looked out the window and saw Doris standing by the doghouse, petting the dog. "She's still just a child," Norma shook her head. "Well, what can you do? I have to get ready for the birth of a grandson or granddaughter, since this is how things turned out." She stepped away from the window and started preparing lunch, but memories kept creeping into her mind. Doris was right, Norma had her first son, Mel, just after she turned 18. Thankfully, she managed to get married, and for that, she had to thank her father. Norma had liked Freddie since school, he was 3 years older than her. After the army, he returned to their village and wasn't eager to start a family just yet. "I need to have some fun," he told his friends. "There are so many nice girls around, I need to check them all out." Every village girl considered it a blessing if Freddie paid attention to her. He never had serious relationships and promised no one marriage, he just had fun. Freddie didn't intend to date Norma either. First, she was younger than him, and kids didn't interest him. Second, he was a bit afraid of her father, Walter, who had a stern demeanor and could say exactly what he thought to anyone's face. It so happened that one of Norma's relatives, who was also Freddie's friend, got married. The wedding was lively. By evening, when the newlyweds retired to their room, the young people continued the celebration by the lake. Norma didn't notice when Freddie appeared next to her and, wrapping his arm around her, said boldly, "I see you've grown up and become quite pretty. Let's take a walk along the shore." Norma nodded in agreement, unable to believe that Freddie had invited her and not some other girl. He continued to hold her by the shoulders, then suddenly stopped and started kissing her lips, neck, and shoulders. He unbuttoned her blouse, and Norma didn't resist or push him away, she seemed paralyzed. Only when it was all over did she cry, holding her blouse closed. Freddie took a cigarette from his pocket, lit it, and said with a smirk, "You're all right, soft, something to hold on to. Come here tomorrow at the same time. I'll be waiting. And if you don't come, I won't be sad, there are plenty of girls out there." "I'll come, Freddie, I promise I'll come," Norma said, buttoning up her blouse. "As soon as it gets dark, I'll be here." Freddie gave her a satisfied look from head to toe and left without even offering to walk her home. Norma slowly walked towards her house, recalling Freddie's kisses and feeling proud that she had become an adult today, all thanks to the man she had loved for so long. The next evening, Norma secretly ran to the lakeshore and saw Freddie sitting on a log, smoking a cigarette. Without any words, he unbuttoned her blouse, and they slowly lay down on the grass. "Do you love me?" she asked quietly, buttoning up her blouse afterward. Her cheeks burned with shame and excitement. "Of course I do," Freddie replied indifferently, not looking at her. "Isn't it obvious?" Norma's heart beat joyfully as she returned home. "He loves me," she repeated happily as she entered the yard, not noticing her father waiting on the porch. "Where were you so late?" he asked sternly. "Seeing boys?" "No, Dad," Norma said, scared and unsure of what to say. "Listen," he cut her off, not wanting to hear her excuses, "if you get pregnant, you'll be in big trouble. Understand?" Norma quickly nodded and slipped past him into the house. For a whole week, Norma snuck out to the lakeshore, climbing out of the window and returning the same way. She feared her parents would notice her absence, but everything went smoothly. She wanted to tell Freddie they should start dating openly, without hiding. However, one evening, he didn't show up at their usual spot. She waited for hours, worried that something might have happened to him. Hearing music from the local club, she hurried there to ask Freddie's friends if they knew where he was. Just as she reached the door, she bumped into Freddie himself, who was leaving with his arm around Irma. He whispered something in Irma's ear, making her laugh. "Why didn't you come to our spot?" Norma asked, standing in front of Freddie. "I waited for you and got cold." "Did I ask you to come?" he smirked, still holding Irma. "You just threw yourself at me and keep chasing after me." "But you said you loved me," tears welled up in Norma's eyes. "So, you lied to me?" "Love's over," Freddie laughed and pushed Norma aside as he and Irma disappeared into the darkness. Norma walked home in a daze. Had enough fun? She flinched at her father's angry voice. He was standing on the porch again. "Get inside, we need to talk." Norma lowered her head and entered the room, seeing her mother sitting on a chair with her hands folded on her lap. "Well, tell us where you've been." "I'm going to teach you a lesson about lying to your parents," her father said, removing his belt. "Walter, don't touch her," her mother stood between them. "Look at Norma, someone has hurt her." Her father looked at Norma closely and lowered the belt. "Go to your room," he said. "If you leave the house without permission again, don't bother coming back." Norma covered her face with her hands and ran to her room, throwing herself on the bed. She buried her head in the pillow and let the tears flow again. Her mother followed her, gently stroking her head, trying to comfort her, but Norma cried until she was completely exhausted. She then took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and fell asleep. Her mother stayed a bit longer, sighed heavily, and then quietly left the room, closing the door behind her. Norma did her best to forget everything that had happened between her and Freddie. In the morning, she went to work, and in the evening, she returned home to help her mother with household chores. Her friends invited her to the movies and dances, but Norma always declined, spending her evenings in her room. Her father was pleased that she had listened to him and put foolish ideas out of her head, but her mother sighed often, seeing her daughter so wilted and joyless. Over time, her mother began to notice something was wrong with Norma. She refused breakfast, pinched her nose when her father smoked, and one day, she saw Norma behind the shed, vomiting violently. "Are you pregnant?" her mother asked cautiously, fearing the answer. Norma nodded silently and burst into tears. "My God!" her mother exclaimed, wringing her hands. "How will we face people now? But more importantly, what will we tell your father? He'll kill you." "Mom," Norma cried out, "don't tell Dad. I'd rather drown myself than face such shame." "Are you out of your mind?" her mother scolded. "I'll talk to your father." It's unclear what words her mother used, but Walter only asked Norma who the father of the baby was. She immediately named Freddie, and now she feared her father might kill him for what he'd done. Armed with the necessary information, Walter quickly left the house and marched toward Freddie's home. He returned an hour later and sternly addressed his wife and daughter. "Freddie's parents are coming tomorrow, so prepare for a wedding. I won't allow my daughter to be shamed in this village." "Walter, can we really force them to marry?" his wife protested. "That's not right." "Is it right for me to be disgraced in front of everyone?" he retorted. "That I couldn't protect my own daughter from such shame? I said there will be a wedding, and there will be." He pounded the table with his fist. "I told Freddie that if he refuses, I'll either throw him in jail or castrate him. And you know I keep my promises." The wedding was a somber affair for the young couple. The guests celebrated and wished happiness to the bride and groom, but Freddie and Norma sat silently at the table, avoiding each other's gaze. Norma couldn't believe her luck in marrying Freddie, while he seethed quietly, fearing Walter's wrath. The newlyweds moved into Freddie's house. His mother welcomed Norma warmly, calling her daughter and shielding her from heavy chores, although Norma tried to help as much as she could. Walter kept a close watch on his son-in-law, even getting him a job at the local garage to keep him under supervision. In due time, Norma gave birth to a son, whom she named Mel. Freddie showed little interest in the child, behaving as if he weren't his own. He was similarly distant with Norma, never speaking kind words or showing affection. His vocabulary towards her consisted of demands: give, go away, bring, leave me alone. But Norma was still grateful to have her husband by her side, a man she deeply loved. 2 years later, Norma gave birth to another son, whom she named after her father, Walter. She adored her children and considered herself a happy woman. Rumors occasionally reached her that her husband was seen with various other women, but Norma paid them no mind. Freddie always came home at night, slept in their bed, and handed over his entire paycheck. Everything changed when Norma's father, Walter, suddenly passed away. That morning, he had gone to work and argued with the mechanics. But in the evening, after work, he sat down on the terrace, collapsed to the side, and that was it, he was gone. Norma grieved deeply for her father, and her mother's health deteriorated so much that she could no longer walk. Norma was torn between two homes, but thankfully, her mother-in-law took care of the children, allowing her some peace of mind. Freddie, however, spiraled out of control. He openly dated other women, making no effort to hide it from Norma. She tried to reason with him and argued, but Freddie told her to hold her tongue or he'd divorce her and become a free man again. Norma understood that with 2 children and a sick mother to care for, her life would be very difficult if Freddie left. So, she ignored his behavior and threw herself into managing the household and raising her children. Norma didn't realize she was pregnant again right away. By then, she was 37 years old. Her eldest son, Mel, was serving in the army, and Walter was finishing high school, preparing to move to the city for college. Her mother was buried next to her father, and her father-in-law had also passed away, leaving her mother-in-law very ill and unable to help. Freddie had grown tired of dating other women and feared his sons, who had warned him that if he mistreated their mother, he'd face consequences. When their daughter was born, Norma was overjoyed. She now had a helper and a comfort in her old age. Freddie adored their daughter, Doris, showering her with gifts to make up for his neglect of their sons. If Norma scolded Doris, Freddie immediately defended her, and Norma, not wanting to ruin her improving relationship with Freddie, backed down. Doris grew up spoiled, knowing she was the youngest and most beloved in the family. Her brothers lived in the city, studying, and all the love and attention of her parents were focused on her. She performed poorly in school, preferring to spend her time with friends. As she grew older, she would sneak out in the evenings to go to the movies or dances instead of studying. Norma feared that Doris would repeat her own mistakes and tried to have serious talks with her, explaining that she had her whole life ahead and didn't need to rush into adulthood. Doris would listen attentively but still leave the house in the evening, leaving Norma alone. Freddie had died 3 years earlier, having taken to heavy drinking and freezing to death in a snowbank one winter night. Norma had little time to mourn him, as Doris was growing up and needed more and more attention. I couldn't keep an eye on Doris, Norma thought, snapping out of her memories. But there's nothing I can do now. We'll manage somehow, as long as the baby is born healthy. A few days after graduation, Doris gave birth to a daughter, whom she named Judy. When she first held the baby in her arms, she felt nothing but surprise at how such a small child could fit inside her. Other mothers in the ward cooed over their babies, delighted by the sounds they made while feeding, but Doris just looked at Judy without any maternal feelings. She remembered the words of her classmate, who had recently given birth and proudly strolled down the village street with a stroller. When I had Sammy, I realized that my life had meaning. I'm ready to devote my whole life to my son, to tear apart anyone who hurts my baby. He's my continuation, my flesh and blood. Doris didn't feel anything like that towards her daughter. After the initial surprise wore off, she felt horror. What was she supposed to do now? Norma, on the other hand, felt immense happiness when she took her granddaughter from the nurse's arms and held her close. It was as if she had given birth to this little miracle herself. Norma found meaning in this tiny, defenseless bundle. She woke up at night to tend to her, rushed home from work to bathe and cuddle her. Doris, however, simply nursed the baby and watched indifferently as she suckled. You should at least cuddle your daughter, Norma scolded Doris. You treat her like a stranger, yet you're her mother. Oh, come on, Mom, Doris lazily replied. She's still little, she doesn't interest me yet. She just eats and sleeps. I'll start paying attention to her when she grows up. Can I go out with my friends? I haven't seen them in ages, I'll catch up on the latest gossip. You're a mother now, your partying days are over, Norma said angrily, looking at her daughter. You'd better bathe the baby and sing her a lullaby. Oh, come on, Doris scoffed. Can't I at least go dancing? It's so boring at home. Just for half an hour. Norma let her daughter go, knowing that she wouldn't be back home in half an hour, or even an hour. Thankfully, she had expressed milk before left, and the grandmother could feed Judy when she was hungry. Be careful not to get pregnant again, Norma would say to her daughter when Doris returned home late. You could at least help me around the house sometimes. I haven't even recovered from childbirth, Doris would reply. As soon as I'm feeling better. Oh, Norma would sigh. You never helped me before childbirth, and now you're just lazy. Once Judy grows a little, we'll send her to daycare, and you'll go to work. Don't object, you've ruined your own life, you could have gone to college to study. Although, with your knowledge, Norma waved her hand and went about her business. In mid-September, Norma returned home from work and, approaching the gate, heard Judy crying loudly. Did Doris fall asleep again and not hear the baby crying, she thought, and quickly entered the house. Her granddaughter was lying in her crib, crying loudly, her diapers were wet, and her face was red from crying. Doris, Norma called out, can't you hear your baby crying? And she's hungry. Doris. Can't you hear me? The house was silent, except for Judy's sobbing as she clung to her warm grandmother's chest. In the kitchen, Norma found bottles of milk and, after feeding the baby, put her back to bed. On the writing desk, where Doris used to do her homework back in school, Norma discovered a piece of paper. She took it with trembling hands and, after reading the first line, understood everything. Oh, you scoundrel, she exclaimed. She ran away. And from whom? From her own mother and her own child. Norma once again brought the piece of paper to her face and began to read it more attentively. Mom, don't look for me, Doris wrote in a shaky handwriting. I've found my love and gone with him to the city. Take care of Judy yourself, you love her very much, and I'm not ready to be a mother yet. I'm still young and I want to be happy, but a child will only hold me back. Norma looked at the sleeping Judy and, grabbing the note, rushed to Doris's friend Elva, whom she had known since first grade. She found Elva and her mother, Raina, clearing weeds in the garden. You know your friend ran away from home, leaving her underage daughter with me? Norma waved the note in the air. Who's the scumbag who took her away? Norma, why are you shouting? Raina, Elva's mother, looked at her neighbor with surprise. Can you explain what happened? What's there to explain? Norma handed Elva the note. Here, read. The girl quickly scanned the lines and handed the note back to Norma. Norma, I told Doris to think carefully before running away from home. But apparently, my words weren't enough. Who is she seeing this time? Norma asked. Don't cover for your friend, I'll find out anyway. I don't know for sure, Elva hesitated. Tell us, Norma and Raina both demanded. It's a newcomer, Rob, the driver they sent to transport grain, Elva began. Doris met him at a dance, and they started meeting at night while Judy was asleep. When Rob was leaving, he asked Doris to go with him, but he made one condition: she couldn't take Judy, saying he wasn't going to raise someone else's child. He promised Doris she'd live in an apartment like a princess, and a girl like her shouldn't live in a poor village. And how long did she spend time with him? Norma frowned. About a month, Elva shrugged. Remember when the trucks came to us to transport grain in mid-August? That's when Doris met Rob. He offered to walk her home, and she didn't refuse. But they didn't make it home, they went to a secluded spot. Doris later told me how they... That's enough, Norma interrupted. Did she leave you any address? No, Elva shook her head. She said she'd write to me herself and let me know how she's doing. Or maybe she'll invite me to live with her. So what? Elva looked at her mother. I want to be a city girl too, go to restaurants. What? Reina said. Go gather leaves. And clear your mind of all this nonsense. Norma returned home and went into the room, looking into the crib where Judy slept. See, granddaughter, what a bad mother you have, Norma said softly, stroking the baby's head. Judy stirred but didn't wake up. What are we going to do now? Norma wondered aloud. I have to go to work, but who will I leave you with? Norma carefully exited the room, closing the door behind her, and walked into the kitchen, where she sat by the window. How could I not keep an eye on Doris, she mused, propping her chin on her hand. I tried so hard for her, didn't burden her with any work. I dreamt that my daughter would be my comfort in old age. But look how it turned out. My sons moved to the city and never visit. They married city girls, picky ones. They came to visit once and only for a day. And they never brought their children to me for the summer. The eldest, Mel, already has 2 sons growing up, smart boys. One is into chess, always going to competitions, and the other, Aaron, is learning music, plays the violin, performs in concerts. And Walter has a daughter, Diana. She goes to a ballet studio, her teachers praise her, saying she has a bright future. She certainly has no place in the village. That's how we live, Norma sighed heavily. No one invites me over, no one comes to visit me. Judy whimpered in the room, and Norma hurried back. So, granddaughter, she said, picking up the baby, it looks like it's just you and me now. I'll be your mother, your father, your grandmother, and your grandfather. We'll manage together. Maybe your mother will come to her senses soon and come back home. She must understand that it's wrong to abandon her own child. Time passed, but Doris never showed up. When Judy turned 6 months old, someone from the village informed Norma that they had seen Doris at a cafe at the train station. Leaving her granddaughter with their neighbor, Sue, Norma went to the city. She reached the train station, found the cafe, and before going in, she peered through the window. The glass was dirty, but she managed to make out her daughter, carrying a tray between the tables, smiling at customers, and clearing empty dishes. Doris wore a short black skirt and a tight white blouse that accentuated her figure, with her breasts almost spilling out. Seeing that there were fewer customers in the cafe, Norma entered and walked up to the counter, where Doris stood wiping glasses with a napkin. So this is the job you found for yourself? Norma exclaimed, glaring at her daughter. Cover yourself up, don't disgrace yourself. At first, Doris looked scared as she glanced at her mother, but then, gaining courage, she defiantly replied. Don't tell me what to do, I'm already an adult and I know what I'm doing. Oh, you. Norma wanted to curse but refrained. How could you abandon your own daughter? Come on, let's go home, stop hanging around here with your backside on display. A man emerged from the back room, glaring angrily at Norma. Woman, what are you shouting about here? Did we serve you badly? We'll fix it in no time. Doris, bring out the best for this lady, he playfully slapped Doris on the rear, and you, madam, take a seat by the window. What would you like to eat? Norma was taken aback but quickly composed herself. I don't need anything, she said, giving the man a stern look. I'm her mother, she pointed at the subdued Doris. Oh, come on, he exclaimed. Why didn't you say so right away? Sit down, my dear, we'll make sure everything is top-notch on the house. He took Norma's hand and led her to a table, then shouted something towards the kitchen. You've got such a beautiful daughter, and her figure is so appetizing, I'd eat her up, he chuckled. Norma sat on the chair, watching as plates of food appeared before her. Enjoy, enjoy, the man pushed a plate of roasted chicken towards her. Norma timidly took the chicken in her hands, took a bite, and closed her eyes in pleasure. The chicken was indeed very tasty. "Well, how is it?" the man smiled at her. "I have the best chicken in town, and everyone knows it. If anyone needs delicious chicken, they come to Oscar, that's my name." "And what's your name?" "Norma," she said with her mouth full, "and it really is delicious, I've never had anything like this before." "And why were you shouting at your daughter like that? What did she do?" "Escaped from home," Norma frowned. "Chased after a better life." "And Judy?" She faltered, seeing her daughter looking at her imploringly, hands clasped together. "She ran away from me," she repeated. "And why doesn't she want to live in the village, near her own mother?" "Yes, running away from your mother is bad," Oscar mused, looking thoughtfully out the window. "I, too, left my family home once, wanted to earn money independently. I opened cafes here and there in the city. When I finally made some money and went back home to show off to my parents, my mother wasn't there anymore. She fell ill from loneliness after I left and passed away. My father remarried a younger woman and had more children. My stepmother and father treated me well. But I miss my mom, would give anything to be with her." "I'm so sorry," Norma said. "Now, I have to go, my bus is soon, and I still need to talk to my daughter." She rose from the table and nodded at Doris to follow her outside. "When will you come back home?" Norma asked sternly, looking at her daughter. "And, by the way, how does your man, the one you ran away from the village with, allow you to work in such a place?" "Rob and I broke up," Doris looked challengingly at her mother. "He lied to me, said he lived alone in an apartment. Turns out, he lives there with his mother, who controlled my every move. She didn't like that I slept until noon, took food from the fridge. I complained to Rob about his mother constantly criticizing me, and instead of supporting me, he told me to leave his house." "And where do you live now?" Norma asked. "Why didn't you come back to the village?" "I was planning to," Doris guiltily lowered her head. "But then I saw an ad that the cafe needed a waitress. Oscar hired me right away and even lent me some money for the start. And I rent an apartment, split the rent with my roommate, Susan. Although she's soon moving in with her boyfriend, but I'll find a new roommate." "Come back home," Norma said. "But, Mom." "No," Norma interrupted. "Pack your things and let's go back to the village." "If I leave now, Oscar won't pay me," Doris argued. "You go now, and I'll come home in a week too. Deal?" After some thought, Norma nodded. "Okay, but you must return in 7 days. Otherwise, I'll come back here and take you home again." After saying goodbye to her daughter, Norma hurried to the bus, confident that her daughter would listen to her and return to the village. A week passed, then another, but Doris didn't show up. After the Christmas holidays, Norma went back to the city and immediately headed to the cafe. This time, Oscar greeted her unfriendly. "Your daughter left," he replied angrily. "Got her paycheck, jumped on a train, and left." "How did she leave?" Norma was astonished. "Where to? How should I know?" Oscar snapped. "She ran away with some guy. He hung around her for a few days, had breakfast, lunch, and dinner in our cafe, and apparently, they cooked something up. I gave her her salary in the morning, and by lunchtime, I saw she wasn't at her workplace. Customers were waiting to be served, complaining. I had to run between tables with trays myself." "Maybe Doris told someone where she was going?" Norma asked. "She didn't tell anyone anything," Oscar shrugged. "Although our cook asked her why she came to work with a suitcase in the morning, but Doris said she packed her things to take them to the dry cleaner. He didn't ask her anything else." Norma lowered her head and silently walked out of the cafe. In a week, Judy would turn 7, and in the autumn, Norma planned to take her to school. The granddaughter called Norma Mom Norma, although she had explained to the girl many times that she had another mother and even showed her photos of Doris from her school days, but Judy didn't remember her mother. Doris occasionally sent letters to her mother, telling her about her life, but never once inquired about her daughter. However, there was no need to reply to these letters, there was never a return address on the envelopes, and Norma only knew where the letters came from by the postmark, indicating which city they were sent from. Apparently, Doris moved from place to place, never staying in one city for long. Norma and her granddaughter were playing in the garden when they didn't notice the gate opening, and Doris entered the yard in a fashionable dress, holding a small travel bag. "Hey, is anyone home?" she peered into the hallway. Not hearing a response, she stepped back into the yard and, circling the house, looked into the backyard. "Mom," Doris called softly, but Norma didn't hear her. "Mom," she repeated, louder this time. Norma turned around, squinting at the woman calling her, not recognizing her daughter. "Don't you recognize me?" Doris laughed. "Have I changed that much?" Norma gasped and approached her daughter. "Doris," she said. "What are you doing here?" "I decided to visit you," Doris hugged and kissed her mother. "My husband came to town on a business trip, so I came with him, and the day after tomorrow, we're going on vacation to the islands." "Oh, why are we just standing here?" Norma bustled. "Let's go inside, I'll feed you, and then you can tell me about your life." "Judy," Norma looked around and called the girl over. "Why are you standing there? Come here, say hello. Do you know who came to visit us?" "Hello," Judy approached timidly and then hid behind her grandmother. "You've grown so much," Doris marveled, examining her daughter. "Do you really not recognize me? How could she recognize you?" Norma shook her head. "You left her when she was 3 months old." "Mom, don't start," Doris grimaced. "Judy, this is your mother," Norma pushed the girl forward. "I've told you a lot about her, we've even looked at photos together." "Okay, Mom," Doris shrugged. "If she doesn't want to say hello, then let it be. Let's go inside, I brought you a gift." While Norma bustled around, setting the table, Doris took out a scarf from her bag and draped it over her mother's shoulders. "It's beautiful," Norma was touched and whispered, "and did you guess to buy a gift for Judy?" Seeing the bewildered look on her daughter's face, she realized Doris hadn't thought about her daughter at all. Norma opened the closet door, took a box from the top shelf, and handed it to Doris. "Here, give this doll to your daughter. I bought it for Judy's birthday, but it's okay, I'll get her something else." Doris went out into the yard. Judy was sitting by the doghouse, talking to a puppy. "This is for you," Doris handed the box to Judy. "A gift from me." Judy cautiously took the box and looked inside. "Is this really for me?" Her eyes lit up with joy. "I've been asking Mom Norma for this doll for a long time, but she said it was too expensive, better to buy something useful." "Mom, why does Judy call you Mom?" Doris returned to the house. "What else should she call me?" Norma said. "I've been raising Judy since she was a baby, so I am her mother." "Then what am I?" Doris felt hurt. "I'm the one who gave birth to her." "Stop it," Norma waved her hand. "Let's not argue. Let's just have some wine." "No, Mom, I won't," Doris hesitated. "I can't." "Are you pregnant again?" Norma exclaimed in horror. "Have you lost your mind? Are you planning to dump another child on me? What are you talking about?" Doris snorted. "Why would I want to give you my child?" "Judy, you left her with me," Norma pursed her lips. "She's not a stranger to you." "Well, that's not what I meant," Doris said. "I'm married now, so the baby will be born within a legal marriage. And what's Judy's fault that you had her without a husband?" Norma looked angrily at her daughter. "She's growing up as an orphan with a living mother. I shouldn't have come here. I thought you missed me all this time, but instead, you've just decided to scold me again." Doris said. Okay, sweetheart," Norma guiltily looked away. "Why did I get so worked up? Sit down and eat instead." Judy hesitated at the threshold as she entered the room. Norma glanced over and called out to her. "Come, join us at the table, let your mom have a good look at how much you've grown. Judy cautiously approached the table and took a seat, opposite Doris, who continued eating, only sparing occasional glances at her daughter. Judy hesitated. Auntie gave me a doll. Look how pretty it is. She showed the toy to Norma. Remember, I asked you to buy it for me at the store. Judy, Norma reproachfully shook her head. Not Auntie, but your mom gave it to you. When will you finally understand that? By the way, did you thank your mom for the gift? Thank you. Judy timidly looked at her mother, hugging the doll close, then quickly got up from her chair and hurried out of the room. She's quite wild, Doris chuckled, doesn't even recognize her own mother. And how does she recognize you? Norma countered. She's lived 7 years without you. It's a good thing I told her about you, or she might not even know she has a biological mother. Here you go again. Doris shrugged. I was young, foolish. I wanted personal happiness. And are you wiser now? Norma asked. Then take your daughter with you. She'll be starting school soon, and you're married now, so you'll have a complete family. You see. Doris bit her lip. Irvin doesn't know yet that I have another child besides the one on the way. But I'll definitely tell him, just a bit later. And will he kick you out if he finds out about Judy's existence? Norma smirked. Sounds like you picked a bad man for yourself. Why do you judge my husband like that? Doris bristled. He's not bad at all. Irvin already has kids, though he doesn't really interact with them, or rather, they don't with him. They're upset that Irvin divorced their mother. But it's not his fault he fell in love with me. So he divorced because of you? Norma gasped. How could you get involved with a married man? Oh, his wife was already old, his kids are grown, and Irvin is in his prime. He needs a young, healthy wife. And how much older is he than you? Norma asked sternly, glaring at her daughter. 20 years, but that doesn't matter, Doris said. The main thing is, he has his own apartment, he works as a supplier in a construction company, so he has money. So, Mom, I'm living like in paradise now, I have everything. Do you love your husband? Norma smirked. Or just his money? Of course, I love him, Doris looked at her mother. Irvin is kind, generous, never denies me anything. But, he's a bit of a bore. He comes home from work, grabs a newspaper or watches the news on TV, and you can't drag him anywhere, not to the movies, not to a restaurant. And like you, he's teaching me life lessons, not to wear short skirts, not to put on bright lipstick. But I'm still young, I want to wear fashionable clothes and makeup. I have to change in the stairwell before coming home and wipe off my lipstick. You have no idea how tired I am of this. So why don't you divorce Irvin? Norma said acidly. And find yourself a younger man. Though, who would want a pregnant woman? No way, Doris replied. Young guys are all broke. And I'm used to living well and spending money on whatever I want. Maybe you can give me some money to prepare Judy for school. Norma challenged her daughter, who suddenly seemed flustered. Well, you see, all the money is with Irvin, and he only gave me a little for the trip, and I used that to buy you the scarf, and I got here by hitchhiking, Doris explained. I see, Norma waved her hand. Can you tell me when you'll take Judy with you? I'm getting older, and the girl needs her mother. Mom, let's discuss this tomorrow, Doris furrowed her brow. I'm leaving back only tomorrow evening. Right now, I want to stroll around the village, maybe visit the club, relive my youth. Fine, go ahead, Norma said. We'll talk about it tomorrow. And don't forget to leave me your address. If you don't take Judy, I'll bring her to you myself. Throughout the evening, Norma and Judy waited for Doris, but she never showed up. The club was still lively, indicating that Doris wouldn't return home until the party ended, and Norma was eager to continue their conversation about Judy's future. In the morning, Norma woke up to a bright sunbeam shining directly into her face. She glanced at the couch she had prepared for her daughter, but it was empty, not even a wrinkle in the blanket. Doris's travel bag was also missing. She ran off again. Norma sighed heavily. Didn't even say goodbye. She felt a bitter pang and went to prepare breakfast for her granddaughter. Afterward, Norma headed to the store to buy another birthday present for Judy. There, she bumped into Elva, who had come for groceries. "Did you see your friend yesterday?" Norma asked Elva. "I did," Elva smirked. "She dropped by, bragging about her lavish life. She has everything: fur coats, fancy dresses, jewelry. She and her husband often travel to islands for vacations." "Ugh, it made me sick. Are you jealous?" Norma glared at Elva. "What's there to jealous?" Elva shrugged. "Thank God, I have a good husband, and my kids are healthy. I'm not chasing wealth, and I don't abandon my children to grandmothers." She grabbed her groceries and headed to the exit. "Wait," Norma stopped Elva, "do you happen to know where Doris went after the club?" "She quietly slipped into the house while my granddaughter and I were asleep, grabbed her bag, and we haven't seen her since." "Oh, she left for the city early in the morning," Elva replied with a smile. "But hey, didn't she even say goodbye to you?" "Not your concern," Norma turned away. "What difference does it make to you whether she said goodbye or not?" "All right then," Elva opened the door and left the store. Back home, Norma found Judy already awake, playing with the doll she had given her. "Let's have breakfast," Norma called her, secretly hiding the teddy bear she had just bought in the closet. "We have a lot of chores to do today. Will you help me?" The girl nodded. Norma hadn't planned any chores for today, but she needed distractions to keep her mind from wandering. She feared Judy would ask about Doris, but the girl didn't even mention her. Only in the evening, as she tucked Judy into bed, hugging the doll tightly, did Judy whisper, "Mom gave me this." Hearing this, Norma rushed out of the house and wept on the porch for a long time. She felt sorry for her granddaughter, herself, and even Doris, who considered herself happy but had such sad eyes, which are never found in truly happy people. In the fall, Norma took Judy to her first day of school, secretly wiping away tears as she watched her granddaughter, holding her backpack and curiously observing everything around her, standing among the other first graders. A year later, Norma received a letter from Doris, once again without a return address. Doris wrote about her newborn son, whom she named Adam. She showed no interest in her daughter or her mother's health, only describing her son as wonderful and healthy, detailing how he slept, ate, and smiled when she held him. She briefly mentioned her own life, saying that everything is fine and that she lives wonderfully without denying herself anything. There was not a single line about her husband, leading Norma to realize that not everything was well in her family. She chose not to read the letter to Judy. It was evident that Doris adored her son and was ready to talk about him endlessly, while her older daughter meant nothing to her. In the next letter, Doris sent a photo of Adam, describing him as a wonderful child, the best in the world. Norma looked at the photo of her grandson and realized she didn't feel any of the emotions a grandmother should. She had given all her love to Judy. Adam was entirely foreign to her, perhaps because Norma had never seen him. She met him 4 years later. Judy was at school, and Norma was preparing lunch when she heard the door open and someone enter the room. "Judy, is that you?" Norma asked from the stove. "Why are you home so early? Did they cancel classes?" "Mom, it's us." Norma peeked out of the kitchen and saw Doris, accompanied by a little boy. "And why did you come?" Norma asked angrily. "I haven't heard from you in 2 years, and now you suddenly show up." "Mom, why do you have to be like this?" Doris frowned. "Let me rest a bit from the road, and then I'll tell you everything. You'd better meet your grandson." She pushed the boy forward. "Adam, this is your grandmother. Remember, I told you about her?" Adam nodded, but he didn't go to his grandmother. He was more interested in the cat sleeping on the chair. Norma bustled around, setting the table, while Doris went into the room where Judy lived and looked around. "Mom, we need to put a second bed here," Doris called out. For Adam. We'll move the table to the corner and put the bed by the window. What are you rearranging here? Norma put her hands on her hips. Did you come to live here? Mom, I said I'd tell you everything. Doris looked around the room again. We need to remove this shelf from here, otherwise, Adam might bump into it. Get out of the room. Norma took her daughter by the hand and led her out. I won't allow you to change anything here. Judy lives in this room, and no one else will be in it. From the kitchen came the cat's meowing and the loud crying of the boy. Norma and Doris went there and saw Adam pulling the cat's tail with force, and in return, the cat scratched his hand. Oh, you! Doris grabbed the cat and threw it forcefully to the floor, then squatted in front of her son and began to soothe him. Calm down, my little one, she stroked the boy's head. I'll put this cat in a bag and drown it in the river so it won't dare to hurt you again. If you touch my cat, I'll drown you myself. Norma glared fiercely at her daughter. Can't you see that Adam is to blame himself? You can't pull cats by the tail. You'd better protect your own grandson instead of this flea-ridden cat, Doris pouted. Let's go eat, Norma suggested. And it's time for me to go back to work. Judy will come home from school, and you'll feed her. We'll talk tonight later. And don't you dare rearrange the furniture without my permission. I'll put everything back in its place anyway. All the while Norma was at work, she couldn't sit still, worrying about Judy. How did she react to her mother and brother coming home? Norma's worries weren't unfounded. Approaching the house, she heard Doris yelling loudly. I asked you to watch Adam while I went to the store. Because of you, he fell and hurt his leg badly, Doris scolded. But it's not my fault, Judy defended herself. I told him not to play around and climb on the chair with one leg broken, but he didn't listen. I wish you had fallen and hit your head, maybe then you would get some brains, Doris continued to shout. Quiet. Norma burst into the house. How dare you yell at Judy? She swung her bag and hit Doris on the back. Don't you dare raise your voice at her, or you'll be out of my house in a second. Clear. Clear, Doris looked scared, staring at her mother. She had never seen her so angry before. Judy, did you finish your homework? Norma asked gently, looking at the girl, who shook her head. No, I didn't have time, she said apologetically, avoiding eye contact. First, I had to wash the dishes that piled up, and then I had to watch Adam. Why couldn't you wash the dishes? Norma frowned at Doris. Do you think everyone here will serve you? Seeing Norma scold Doris, Adam started crying loudly, and she immediately rushed to him, offering him a chocolate bar. Here, sweetheart, eat this and calm down. Judy looked at the chocolate and swallowed her saliva. Norma rarely bought her sweets, there was never enough money. She turned around and went to her room, took out her textbooks from her bag, and started her homework. Why didn't you offer some chocolate to your daughter? Norma protested. Is she any less important to you? Doris didn't respond. All right, spill it. Why did you come here? Norma sat down on a chair, looking at Doris questioningly. Did you divorce your husband, and he kicked you out? Irvin died, Doris replied softly. And you know what? He left me completely broke. I thought he had some savings, but shortly before he died, he withdrew all the money and bought an apartment for his eldest son. He didn't even consult with me, I would have definitely made a scene and not let him spend that money. That's why he didn't consult with you, Norma shook her head. It's his money, and he has the right to do whatever he wants with it. But what about me and Adam? Doris squealed. I've been asking Irvin for a new ring for ages, and Adam needed to be taken to the seaside. What did your husband die from? Norma asked. I'm not sure, Doris waved her hand. It seemed like a heart attack. There was a major shortage of construction materials at work, and Irvin was very worried that he could be imprisoned for it. They even came to us with a search warrant, and I think they found some documents. But I didn't delve into those details. The main thing is that Irvin left us without money. But you said he had an apartment where you lived? Norma looked surprised at her daughter. What happened to it? Oh, don't remind me, Doris grimaced. If you only knew how much stress it caused me. The heirs arrived right away, his sons, and started dividing the property. But I'm no fool, I won't give up what's rightfully mine. We sold that cursed apartment and everything in it, and split the money. Adam and I got the most. After all, I was Irvin's legal wife, and Adam is his biological son. Now I'm planning to buy a new apartment, but I haven't decided which city yet. That's why I want to leave Adam with you for a while until I find a place for us. Mom, you'll look after him, right? You must be out of your mind. Norma exclaimed. Not only have I been raising your daughter since she was 3 months old, now you want to dump your son on me too? Have you thought about me at all? I'm retired, but I still have to work to support Judy, and my health isn't what it used to be. Some mornings I can't even get out of bed, my head spins, and my legs refuse to move. And you want me to look after a little child again? Let Judy help you, Doris replied calmly. She's old enough. I won't turn my granddaughter into a nanny, Norma frowned. God forbid she neglects Adam, like today, you'll put us all in danger. But what am I supposed to do? Doris looked apologetically at her mother. I can't drag Adam around different offices to handle paperwork for the apartment. Besides. She hesitated, I recently met a man, and we're having a romantic relationship, but I have no one to leave Adam with in the evenings. Oh, I see, Norma laughed. No, dear daughter, don't count on me anymore. It's time for you to wise up. I won't keep Adam with me, don't even hope for it. And if you sneak away again, abandoning him, I'll take him to a children's home, and I'll report you to the police. But, Mom, Doris began. And don't you dare argue with me, Norma interrupted her, raising her voice. You gave birth to children, now raise them. I can't handle 2, and I still need to get Judy back on her feet. If something happens to me, who will take care of her, you? I'm not kicking you out of the house, just take Adam with you when you leave. Well, I didn't expect this from you, Mom, Doris pouted discontentedly. Well, if that's how it is, then Adam and I will leave here tomorrow, and you'll never see us again. Oh, you scared me, Norma laughed again. As if you used to visit us often before. And what have you become? She sighed sadly. Your brothers come to see me every year, at least for a week. They help around the house. And what have you done? You haven't given a single penny to your own daughter. I barely have enough for myself, Doris muttered. Of course, you don't have enough, Norma looked tiredly at her daughter. You spend all your money, you don't know their value. If you worked, you'd appreciate every cent you earned. Are you going to lecture me again? Doris said. If only you knew how tired I am of your sermons. Tomorrow morning, Adam and I will leave, and you won't see us again. Have a safe journey, Norma smirked. Just don't have a third child and try to dump them on me. Doris ran out of the house in tears, and Norma spent a long time afterward, replaying that difficult conversation in her head, but she couldn't have handled it any differently. Norma could see that Adam was growing up to be a spoiled boy, whom Doris forgave everything. At dinner, he deliberately spilled milk on the table, and when Norma reprimanded him, he immediately burst into tears. And once again, Doris gave him a chocolate bar without offering any to Judy. Then he climbed onto the bed and started jumping on it, dirtying the pillows with his chocolate-covered hands. Norma scolded him again, but Adam seemed not to hear her and continued jumping. So Norma pulled him off the bed, and the boy punched her in the chest with his fist and called her a fool. Doris is going to have a tough time with her Adam, Norma thought sadly. She doesn't seem to notice how her son behaves, just looks at him with love and smiles. Norma tried to talk to her daughter about not spoiling the boy so much, but Doris just scoffed and replied. Adam is still young, you can't forbid him anything. But when Adam ran into the room where Judy was doing her homework and crumpled her school notebooks, Norma couldn't hold back. She grabbed the boy and gave him a light smack on the bottom. It didn't hurt him at all, but for the first time in his life, he was punished for misbehaving. He cried so loudly that it could be heard in the neighboring house. Doris grabbed her son and started yelling at her mother, saying that Norma was willing to hurt little Adam because of her precious Judy. And Adam stuck his tongue out at his grandmother and called her a fool again. So, when Doris and Adam left the next morning, both Norma and Judy breathed a sigh of relief. Norma was over 70 years old when Judy graduated from school. She dreamed that her granddaughter would get a higher education in a big city, but Judy decided to enroll in the local college and become a teacher. "How can I leave you here alone?" Judy looked at her grandma Norma with pity. "You can barely move around the house." "No, I'll study here, and I'll get a job at the school where they need a cleaner, and I'll gain some experience in the meantime. After getting my diploma, I plan to work at our school as an elementary school teacher." "Oh, Judy, how I wish you would go to the city, life is more interesting there," Norma sighed. "You won't always stay by my side." "I have my whole life ahead of me," Judy said. "Right now, the most important thing is your health. You said you wanted to dance at my wedding, and for that, we need to heal your legs." Judy submitted her application to the college. She had always done well in school, but she was still nervous about the entrance exams, which were 2 months away. In the meantime, she worked at the school during the day and took care of household chores in the evening. After returning from work, Judy helped Norma go outside, seated her on a bench, and then went back inside to clean the house, do laundry, cook food, and finally, she would sit next to her grandma Norma, and they would talk about everything in the world. Norma mostly recounted the news she had heard on the radio or TV, while Judy talked about the ongoing renovations at the school. Sometimes their neighbors would join them and start gossiping about the villagers. Judy didn't like these conversations and would go back inside. "Why do you keep your granddaughter cooped up with you?" Sue once asked Norma. "She doesn't have a boyfriend, and she's never been on a date." Unlike her mother, Doris, who never wasted time. "By the way, how is she doing? She hasn't visited you in a while." "It's true, she hasn't," Norma nodded. "At least she started talking to her brothers again. Though if it weren't out of necessity, she wouldn't have remembered them." "What happened?" Sue moved closer to Norma. "Oh, she spoiled her Adam so much that he got himself into trouble," Norma shook her head. "He got involved with the wrong crowd and started extorting money from passers-by at night. They got caught and taken to the station. Adam is still a minor, so he avoided jail time, but they put him on record. But that didn't stop him. By that time, Doris had gotten involved with a man who had a car. Adam took it without permission to show off to his friends. Not knowing how to drive, he crashed into the first pole he saw. He wrecked the car, injured his friends, but he didn't get a scratch. When they investigated, they found out Adam was also drunk at the time. Doris tried to justify her son and hired a lawyer who advised her to settle with the victims to avoid charges. Additionally, Doris's boyfriend demanded compensation for the damaged car. That's when she remembered her brothers, who helped their sister, but even their assistance wasn't enough. Doris had to take out loans, which she is still paying off. "Did she come to visit you?" Sue asked. "No, she didn't," Norma sighed. "But I received a letter from her. I didn't want to talk about it. Doris wrote that something bad happened to Adam and he urgently needed help. She didn't specify what happened, probably too ashamed to tell me. I warned her that spoiling Adam would lead to regret. In the letter, she asked me for money and even suggested, if you don't have any savings, sell the house and send me the money to save your grandson." When I read that, I nearly blacked out. Doris was willing to leave her mother and daughter without a roof over their heads to save her Adam. The envelope had a return address this time, so while Judy was at work, I wrote back to my daughter. "What did you say to her?" Sue asked, almost holding her breath with curiosity. I wrote, I never expected you, Doris, to grow up so shameless. You abandoned your own daughter and never sent a cent or a gift all this time. Instead, you spoiled Adam and turned him into a bandit and a selfish person. Now, to save him, you want to leave your mother and daughter homeless. Don't count on my help, and forget about this house. I will leave it to Judy in my will, and my sons support this decision. And what did Doris reply to that letter? Nothing, Norma shrugged. As I told you, she's struggling with loans now. She has to figure it out on her own. Mom, are you heading home? Judy approached the bench. It's getting cold, and it's time for dinner. You've raised a good girl, Sue nodded approvingly. She deserves a good husband and children. God willing, it will all come true. Thank you, Sue, Norma said, struggling to her feet with Judy's help. Come by again for a chat. At home, Judy set the table and then sat across from Norma, speaking seriously. What was Sue talking about? I don't plan on getting married. I'd rather stay with you all my life, and I don't need anyone else. And when I'm gone, what will you do? Norma smiled. Will you be alone forever? Look at all the boys around, you should consider someone. Oh, no, Judy said, blushing. She remembered the young math teacher who had joined the school a year ago. No, dear, Norma sighed. A person can't be alone. Family is like a refuge that helps you endure all hardships. Remember when you were bullied at school, who did you run to? Right, to me, because I'm your family and I always supported you. And you're my family, whom I cared for and protected. Now you've grown up and should create your own family, where you'll care for your husband and future children. Your children will come to you for advice, help, and love. You will be their support, just as I was for you. And your family will be happy if it has love, forgiveness, and patience. This is the foundation of any good family. Mom Norma, is it really that simple? Judy was amazed. To have a happy family, you only need to love, forgive, and be patient. Well, it's not just that, Norma smiled. Respect, support, and care are important too. You'll learn when you get married. That won't be soon, Judy lowered her eyes. You know I need to get my diploma first, then think about marriage. One doesn't interfere with the other, Norma chuckled, and she was right. Chad arrived in the village after finishing college to work as a teacher. He was short, wore large glasses that he often adjusted with his hand. Chad was a third-generation teacher, his grandmother taught chemistry, and his mother was a history teacher. So, teaching was in his genes. His grandmother and mother were thrilled that Chad followed in their footsteps but were disappointed when he announced he would teach at a village school after getting his diploma. He wanted to become independent, which required leaving his parents' home. Chad loved interacting with children and found great personal satisfaction in it. He quickly got along with his colleagues who supported and helped him. Chad rented a room from an elderly woman named Melinda. He woke up very early, did his morning exercises, had breakfast, and arrived at school by 7 to prepare for the day's lessons. Chad enjoyed working at the village school because the teacher-student relationships were much simpler than in city schools. Parental involvement was also more thorough in the village. After school, parents often stopped Chad on the street to ask how their child was doing and if there were any behavior issues. Chad never complained about his students, only subtly hinting at areas parents should focus on in their children's upbringing. Chad noticed Judy when she was still a senior in high school. He was surprised to see her working as a school janitor after graduation. I thought you were planning to go to college, Chad approached Judy while she was mopping the classroom floor. Did you change your mind? Why would you think that? Judy shrugged. I've already applied to college. I'm just worried I won't pass the exams because I get nervous and forget everything. Would you like me to help you study? Chad offered unexpectedly. Oh, no, Judy looked at him in surprise. You're such a busy person. Well, first of all, it's vacation time, Chad smiled. So, there's not much for me to do at school right now. And second, I'm always happy to help such a charming young lady like you. Judy blushed even more and ran out of the classroom. That evening, she told Norma about their conversation, and her grandmother scolded her. Why do you refuse help when a good person offers it? Grandma, it's just awkward. He was my teacher. Judy lowered her eyes. A teacher is still a person, Norma said with a smirk. Invite him over for dinner. We'll feed your teacher, and I'll ask him about his life to decide if you should study with him or not. The next day, Judy met Chad again and timidly invited him over. To her surprise, he was delighted and promised to come, admitting that he hadn't made many friends in the village yet and often felt lonely far from home and friends. Chad arrived holding a waffle cake he bought at the store. Come in, Norma invited him to the table. Haven't had a home-cooked meal in a while, have you? To be honest, Chad admitted, it's been a long time. Even when I lived at home, I mostly ate frozen meals. Doesn't your mother know how to cook? Norma asked, surprised. It's not that hard. Mom just doesn't have the time, Chad said, savoring a spoonful of soup. She's a teacher too, just like me. She spends all day at school and evenings preparing for the next day's classes or at the library. I also have a grandmother, but she's old and almost blind, so she mostly stays in her room listening to literary programs on the radio. What about your father? Norma asked. My dad passed away 5 years ago, Chad sighed. He taught global economics at the university. I see, Norma looked at him with pity. You should eat more, you're so skinny. It just looks like I'm weak, Chad smiled. Actually, I work out a lot, so I'm quite strong. I noticed your fence is leaning, would you like me to fix it? Well, go ahead, Norma said. Judy, show Chad where the tools are. Judy and Norma watched from the window as Chad repaired their fence. Look at that, Norma nodded approvingly. He didn't lie, the fence looks brand new. Now I see he's a reliable man. I'll allow you to prepare for your exams with him, but only at our house and under my supervision. Every evening, Chad started coming over to Judy's house, and Norma would see them sitting at the table, hunched over textbooks. Afterward, they would all have tea together and chat, with Chad sharing stories about his college days, friends, and family, while Norma talked about village life. Judy, however, sat quietly, still shy around Chad, who she liked more and more. When Judy got into college, Chad seemed happier than Judy herself. I told you you could do it, he exclaimed when Judy informed him of her acceptance. And you doubted yourself. Now the main thing is to keep up with all the assignments. If you ever need help, you can count on me. The school year began, and Judy continued her studies while still working as a janitor at the school. Sometimes, she would peek into the first-grade classroom and watch Mrs. Healers teach. Judy, Mrs. Healers would say, once you finish college, you can take my place. It's about time I retired. Once, Judy had to substitute for Mrs. Healers when she caught a severe cold and was bedridden for 2 weeks. Judy enjoyed teaching the first graders to read, count, and write letters. As her first semester came to an end, Judy diligently studied and took her exams. Meanwhile, Norma's health was deteriorating. She had severe leg pain at night, her blood pressure was rising, and in the mornings, she sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, waiting for the dizziness to pass. One day, Judy came home from school to find Norma lying on the floor. Judy was terrified as Norma could only make incoherent sounds, her face twisted. Norma was taken to the hospital, where the grim diagnosis was made, stroke. Judy had already finished her exams and now spent her time visiting Norma in the hospital. She fed her with a spoon, turned her over, changed her linens, and constantly asked the doctors and nurses when her mother would get better. The doctors would avert their eyes and say they were doing everything possible. They felt sorry for the young girl, knowing that Norma would never walk again. Unfortunately, too much time had passed, and there was no hope for recovery. Judy believed her mother Norma would be okay and return home soon, but one day, when she entered the hospital room, she saw that Norma's bed was empty. A nurse followed Judy into the room, placed a hand on her shoulder, and quietly said, "She didn't suffer. She fell asleep and didn't wake up in the morning." Judy was numb with grief. She didn't shed a tear, not even at the funeral, where Mel and Walter came with their wives and children. At the wake, Judy sat at the table, not hearing the conversations around her. "At least she didn't suffer," Sue sighed, wiping away a tear, "and she didn't burden anyone." Poor Judy would have had to take care of a paralyzed grandmother. "Yes, yes," nodded the neighbor from across the street, "but now it's uncertain how Judy will manage alone. Maybe Mel and Walter will take her to the city." "And Doris didn't even come to the funeral," Sue noted. "She might not even know her mother passed away." After everyone left, Mel and Walter sat down next to Judy. "Well, niece, who are you going to move in with? We can't leave you here alone, you understand that," Mel said. Judy looked at them, uncomprehending. "I'm not going anywhere," she shook her head. "How can I leave the house? Everything here reminds me of Mom Norma, and someone needs to take care of her grave. Don't worry about me, I'm strong, I can handle it. Just visit me often, I'd really appreciate it." "Maybe you're right," Mel sighed, getting up from the bench. "Just remember, you can come to us anytime, and we'll always be here to help." The first few months were tough for Judy. She left for college early in the morning, then went to work, visited the library, and finally returned home to an empty house. She lost a lot of weight because she stopped cooking, relying only on the cafeteria food. She wandered around the house without turning on the lights, talking out loud to Norma, telling her all the news from the day. By spring, things started to get a bit easier, but new problems arose. The roof began to leak, and the porch was falling apart. The old boards had rotted over the winter, and Judy had no idea how to fix them. She considered writing to her Uncle Mel or Uncle Walter but decided against it, thinking they had enough to deal with in the city. She shared her troubles with the school cook, who shrugged and said, "I don't know how to help you. Ask the neighbors, maybe someone can fix your roof and porch." They didn't notice Chad entering the cafeteria. He stood at the door for a moment before quietly leaving. On Sunday morning, Judy woke up to an unfamiliar sound. She looked out the window and saw someone repairing her porch. She opened the front door and saw Chad, hammering away at new boards. "Oh, what are you doing here?" she asked innocently. "Fixing the porch," Chad replied, still hammering. "Once I finish, I'll take care of the roof." Judy blushed and ran back into the house, rushing around to tidy up. "Would you like some tea?" she asked when she returned to the porch. "I wouldn't mind some soup," Chad smiled. "Last time, it was really good." "Oh, but I don't have any groceries," Judy said, then brightened up, "but that's okay, I'll quickly run to the store." Judy hurried to the store and started making soup. By the time Chad came down from the roof, everything was ready. "You wouldn't guess you could do all this yourself," Judy remarked as she placed a bowl of soup in front of Chad. "My grandfather taught me," Chad said. "He was a carpenter and could do anything. He always told me, 'Learn from me, grandson. Your father's too wrapped up in his books. A man should know how to do everything.' My mom Norma taught me to cook, sew, and embroider," Judy said, a tear rolling down her cheek. "I miss her so much." "Why do you call your grandmother Mom Norma?" Chad asked, pushing his empty bowl away. "Where's your real mother? Did she pass away?" "No," Judy sighed heavily. "As my uncles tell it, my mother is alive and well. She abandoned me when I was just 3 months old and left me with my grandmother, who raised me. I've only seen my mother twice, once when I was in 4th or 5th grade, I can't remember exactly, and the second time she came with Adam, my biological brother, but they didn't stay long. I don't know all the details, but I understand one thing: if my mother had wanted me, she would have visited me more often. How could she abandon her own child? Doesn't she feel any guilt? Chad pondered. I've thought about that too, Judy nodded. I even wanted to go see her, look her in the eye, and ask, what did I do to deserve growing up without a mother's love and care? Why didn't you go? Chad asked, looking at her intently. Honestly? She lowered her eyes. I was afraid of the emotional pain it would cause because I had a feeling what her answer would be. Seeing that Judy was about to cry, Chad tried to change the subject. While I was fixing the roof, I noticed the gate in the backyard is crooked. I'll come back next time and fix it. Oh, you don't have to, Judy said, embarrassed. I'm already so grateful for the porch and the roof. You spent the whole day on it. By the way, how much do I owe you for the work? Not everything in the world is measured by money, Chad replied, a bit offended. I didn't mean to offend you, Judy blushed even more. How about I bake you a pie next time you come? Mom Norma always said my pies were very good. I'd like that, Chad smiled. But now I have to go. I have to prepare for a test for my 8th graders tomorrow. Judy cleared the table, then approached Norma's portrait hanging on the wall. Mom Norma, I think I'm in love, she said quietly. I've never loved anyone before, so I don't know what it's like, but when I see Chad, my heart beats faster, I get nervous, and my face turns red. Maybe this really is love. Judy felt as if Norma was smiling at her, approving of everything she said. Chad started visiting Judy more often to help her out. Judy successfully passed her spring exams, and in a couple of weeks, she would turn 18. On the morning of her birthday, she went to the cemetery and sat by Mom Norma's grave, reminiscing about how she always made sure to have a gift ready for Judy's birthday. Judy returned home and began cleaning the house. She wasn't expecting any guests, so she just went about her usual daily chores. She didn't notice when Chad entered the house, standing at the doorway with a cardboard box in his hands. Judy, he said softly, though she still jumped in surprise. Happy birthday, he said, extending the box toward her. I wish you all the best, and of course, love. She opened the box to find a pair of high-heeled shoes she had recently seen and tried on in the store. However, when Judy saw the price, she had reluctantly put them back. And now, here they were in her hands. But how did you know it was my birthday and that I liked these shoes? She asked, looking at Chad with admiration. Well, it wasn't hard. I found your birth date in your school records. As for the gift, that happened by chance. I went to the store and asked the saleswoman for advice on a gift for you since I didn't know your tastes. She remembered you trying on these shoes but putting them back with regret. This is a very expensive gift, Judy said, embarrassed. I can't accept it. Please take the shoes back to the store. No way, Chad protested. You don't refuse gifts. So, wear them. And why isn't your table set? Didn't you invite anyone for your birthday? Oh, I'll fix that right away, Judy said, bustling around. Okay, Chad nodded. I'll take a look around the yard to see what else needs fixing. Judy was finishing setting the table when she heard Chad talking to someone outside. She went out to the porch and saw her biological mother standing by the fence. Judy's heart leaped with joy. Could it be that my mother remembered my birthday and came to congratulate me? She quickly ran down the porch steps and approached her mother, hoping for an embrace. But her mother looked Judy up and down and said, So, I'll get straight to the point. I don't have time, the taxi is waiting. I'm here to claim my share. What share? Judy asked, confused. I don't have anything. How can you not have anything? Doris retorted angrily. What about the house? My brothers don't want any of the inheritance, but I'm not giving up my share. But Mom Norma left this house to me, Judy said. She even showed me the documents. I don't care, Doris said. I need money urgently. Adam is in trouble, he might go to jail, so I need money to bail him out. And I thought you came to wish me a happy birthday, Judy lowered her head. But all you care about is Adam. What does your birthday have to do with anything? Doris glared at Judy. I need to save my son, don't you understand that? And what does Judy have to do with it? Chad approached and put his arm around Judy's shoulders. She told you the house belongs to her, it was your mother's wish. And I fully agree with it. And who are you? Doris's eyes filled with anger. Your grandmother dies, and you turn this place into a brothel. Judy wanted to respond, but Chad didn't let her. Who am I? He looked Doris straight in the eye. I'm Judy's husband, and I live here with her legally. Husband? Doris was taken aback. Isn't it a bit early for you to get married, Judy? Do you remember how old you were when you had me? This house is mine, it's a memory of my grandmother, and you won't get a cent from it. Solve your problems with Adam yourself and never come here again. Do you understand me? Judy's courage grew. How dare you talk to your mother like that? Doris fumed. Your grandmother did a poor job raising you. She raised her hand to hit Judy, but Chad caught it. Leave now, before I call the police, and never threaten my wife again. I don't care if you're a woman, I'll hit you too. How dare you show up here after everything you've done? Abandoning your newborn daughter to an elderly woman and moving to the city to live your life. I know everything about you. You'll regret this, Doris spat out. You'll remember me. She yanked open the gate, got into the waiting car, and drove away. Judy stood in the middle of the yard, covering her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Chad approached her, embraced her, and held her close. Well, calm down, he said, stroking Judy's head. It's your birthday today, and on this day, you should only be happy and enjoy yourself. By the way, you promised to treat me to dinner, or have you changed your mind? Judy shook her head and, wiping away tears, went up to the porch, with Chad following her into the house. Why did you call me your wife? Judy asked, as they drank tea. That's not true. Mom Norma told me it's not nice to deceive people. Why deceive? Chad looked at her seriously. I just jumped the gun a bit, Judy. He stood up and walked over to her. You turned 18 today, marry me. I promise to protect you from any harm. Marry? Judy also stood up from her chair. But I. Oh, she covered her face with her hands. I don't know. So are you agreeing or not? Chad persisted. I think your grandmother would be happy that you're starting a family and won't be alone anymore. Judy looked at Norma's portrait, which, as she felt, smiled approvingly and nodded her head. I do. For the wedding, Mel and Walter came from the city with their families, and unexpectedly for Judy, Isabella, Chad's mother, also appeared. Grandma couldn't come, unfortunately, she said, kissing her son and daughter-in-law. She's been feeling very poorly lately, but I promised to tell her everything later. Well, Judy, Isabella looked kindly at the bride, let's get acquainted. Although I feel like I've known you for ages. Chad wrote to me about you in every letter, how independent, smart, and beautiful you are. Grandma sends her regards and hopes that you'll come visit us soon, or even move to the city, then we can all live together. I'm not sure yet, Judy lowered her eyes. I still have to finish college, and I'm used to it here. Although, she looked lovingly at Chad, as my husband says, so it will be. Where he goes, I go. Mom, let's discuss this later, Chad looked at his mother. Now is not the time. They celebrated into the late night. Everyone was having fun and rejoicing. Only one thing saddened Judy. It's a shame Mom Norma didn't live to see this day, tears welled up in her eyes. She would have been so happy for me. Chad hugged his wife and held her close. Now you have me, he kissed her passionately. And I hope we'll have children soon. At least, I would really like that. 9 months later, Judy gave birth to a daughter, whom they named Norma, after her grandmother, and 2 years later, a son, Timothy, was born. By that time, Judy had finished college and was preparing to start working at the school. Mrs. Healers had become quite elderly and was eagerly awaiting Judy to take over her place at the chalkboard. Judy herself was eager to start teaching first graders as soon as possible, but for now, she was busy with household chores and raising the children. Chad turned out to be a very good husband. After his classes, he hurried home, helped Judy with the children, did household repairs, and then, at night, sat at the table, turned on the desk lamp, and prepared for the next day's lessons or graded assignments. Judy tried not to burden her husband with household chores. She saw how tired he was at school, but Chad still helped his wife, trying to support her. Mel visited them more often than Walter, and he liked how Chad and Judy lived together. One day, the two of them were sitting on a bench outside the house. "Does your mother-in-law ever come to visit?" Mel asked Chad, lighting a cigarette. "No," Chad replied. "I've only seen her once in my life, even before Judy and I got married. She came to demand her share of the house. Apparently her son got into some trouble and needed to be bailed out to avoid jail." "Oh, Doris spoiled her Adam," Mel sighed. "And now she's suffering for it. Her son doesn't value her at all, doesn't respect her. Yet she's still willing to do anything for him. She recently came to me again asking for money, supposedly for Adam's medication, but I know what those medications are for. Adam is a drug addict and can't live without a fix. He's living the good life, supported by his mother, and he doesn't study or work, just extorts money from his mother. So Doris begged me when I told her I knew everything about her son. Begged me to give her money, otherwise Adam might beat her if she doesn't get him the money." "And did you give her money for drugs for her son?" Chad looked at Mel in surprise. "If the money were needed for food or medical treatment, I certainly wouldn't refuse my sister. But for that junk, no." He lit another cigarette. "Doesn't Doris realize she's pushing her son to his grave with her own hands? And she looks terrible herself. If you saw what she looks like now, an old, tired woman, and she's not even 40 yet, but she looks 60. Where does Doris work?" Chad asked. "How does she support her son?" "She got a job as a janitor," Mel smirked. "She has no education beyond high school. She also works as a cleaner. She earns peanuts, and she spends it all on her little boy. Yeah, tough luck." Chad looked into the distance. "And about her daughter, she probably doesn't even remember. Does she even know she has a grandson and granddaughter?" "I told her," Mel nodded. "But I think she didn't even pay attention to my words. She needed money for Adam, and nothing else interested her. That's how it turns out." He sighed again. "Judy grew up without a mother's love and affection, but she turned out to be so kind and caring, finished college, got married, and had 2 children. And Adam just bathed in his mother's love from birth, and what did he become? A layabout, selfish, and a drug addict. How do you explain that?" "I recently read," Chad furrowed his brow, "that excessive motherly love, especially towards a son, can lead to serious negative consequences in his life, both in childhood and adulthood. Such a child grows up spoiled, selfish, all his whims are immediately fulfilled, and he grows up unprepared for life because he's used to having everything decided for him and everything permitted." "That's true," Mel nodded with respect. "And also," Chad continued, "when the son grows up, he becomes aggressive towards his mother and towards people in general. Through alcohol or drugs, he tries to assert himself as a man, and often unconsciously resents his mother for his messed up life." "That's all clear," Mel looked at Chad with respect. "But how do you explain the fact that Doris doesn't even remember Judy, her eldest daughter, but adores Adam, the drug addict, from the moment he was born?" "Unfortunately, such things happen," Chad said. "I think Judy's mother was very young when she had her, and it seemed like the whole world collapsed at that moment, and life was over. Her daughter was a burden to her, and she longed for love, freedom, and happiness. So Judy became an annoyance to her just by existing. And her son, firstly, was born in a legitimate marriage when financial prosperity was quite good, and secondly, Doris is one of those people who are partial to the male gender. But, as I understand it, she wasn't lucky with men, so she poured all her love onto her son, thus ruining his life, as well as her own. Well, you're quite the philosopher, Chad, Mel admired. I'm just a teacher, Chad smiled, who has to be both a philosopher and a psychologist to reach the souls of his students. And if Doris does come here when she gets tired of pleasing Adam, and he kicks her out? Mel suggested. She'll have nowhere to go, except maybe onto the streets. What will you do? That's for my wife to decide, Chad got up from the bench. She's her mother, and whatever Judy decides, I'll accept it without reproach. But I won't interfere in the relationship between mother and daughter. Good on you, buddy. Mel also got up and patted Chad on the back. Let's go inside, have some beer, we've chatted enough. Doris returned home from work, hoping that Adam had gone somewhere and she could rest a bit in peace. Her back hurt badly from the hard work, and she longed to lie down on the bed, close her eyes, stretch out her legs, and not think about anything. In the mornings, she swept the streets, and when winter came, she cleared the snow near the entrances, then she washed the staircases. Towards evening, she went to the nearby restaurant, put on an apron, pulled on rubber gloves, and started washing the dishes brought by the waiters. The money she earned barely covered the utilities and groceries. What saved her was that sometimes she brought home leftovers from the restaurant, which the chefs shared in the kitchen. All the other money Doris earned was spent on Adam, or rather, he demanded it from his mother, for clothes, cigarettes, entertainment, and lately, even drugs. Doris didn't realize at first that her son was a drug addict until she found needle marks on his arms, but she refused to admit it until the end. Doris begged him to stop and not use that junk, but Adam didn't even listen to her, and several times, when his mother annoyed him with her lectures, he even hit her. Any remarks from his mother Adam perceived as aggression, an attack on his personal freedom. He considered his mother his servant, who should fulfill all his whims and desires. Adam was convinced that his mother was only needed to earn money and give it to him, her beloved son. When Doris tried to protest, he shouted in her face. Why do I still need you? You gave birth to me, so you're obligated to feed me, clothe me, and give me money for pocket expenses. But I'm not going to work, I didn't come into this world for that. Let the suckers work, I'm doing just fine as it is. Doris became afraid of her son, constantly crying. When Adam experienced withdrawal, he blamed her for all his problems and even threatened to throw her off the 6th floor. Things got even worse when Adam brought Tina into the apartment and called her his wife. Now the apartment turned into a real hell. Adam and Tina would leave in the middle of the night, then quickly return, and after some time, having taken their dose, they would start having fun, listening to loud music, laughing. Doris plugged her ears, but the noise prevented her from sleeping until morning, and then she went to work, nodding off on the way. One day, passing by the church, she decided to step inside. Standing before the icons, she asked only one question, Lord, what have I done to deserve this? Why do you send me such trials? The stern eyes of the icons looked at her accusingly, and Doris was frightened by this gaze, but she felt a little relieved. Doris often visited this church, standing before the icons for a long time, and once even burst into tears, remembering that morning when Adam hit her again because she refused to give him money, which she didn't have anyway. Go ahead, cry, dear, an old woman in a dark scarf on her head approached her. It will make you feel better. And if things are really bad, talk to our priest. He's strict but fair. How do I find this priest? Doris asked, sobbing. Why look for him? The woman smiled. There he is, by the window, talking to another parishioner like you. Go on, don't be afraid. Doris approached the window, hesitatingly stopping near the priest. What is it, my child? He looked at her with kind eyes. I need to talk, she stammered. I'm listening to you. What did you want to talk to me about? There was such tranquility emanating from the priest, his voice was so gentle, that Doris gained courage and told him about her problems with her son, about how she didn't want to go home because there awaited her a dirty apartment, syringes scattered everywhere, about how tired she was working 3 jobs just to make ends meet. The priest listened attentively, stroking his gray beard. "You, my daughter, ask why this is happening to you. And I will answer you that troubles and misfortunes don't just come to us out of the blue. It all indicates that we are living wrong and that God no longer wants to tolerate our sins, so he punishes us. Think about where and what you've done wrong, what sins you have. You need to confess your sins, but don't expect immediate help from God. He must see your true repentance, your good deeds, only then will he believe in you and help you. And if you don't do this, you may lose your son. But I did everything for my son. Where does such ingratitude come from?" Tears streamed down Doris' cheeks. "I didn't force him to do anything, bought him everything he wanted, spoiled him, protected him." The priest fell silent again. A boy is a future man, and parents in upbringing should give him freedom, entrust him with responsibility for his decisions, rather than trying to solve everything for him. If a mother decides everything for him, he grows up unable to do anything, incapable of realizing himself in life, and not taking responsibility for the people close to him. And what is such a man to do in this life? He chooses alcohol, drugs because he's not adapted to anything. Do I have a chance to save my son? Doris looked at the priest imploringly. I already told you. Now the priest looked at her very sternly. Repent of your sins and pray. And now forgive me, the service is starting soon, and I need to prepare for it, he said and left. Doris walked home, recalling her conversation with the priest. These words were unfamiliar to her, confessing sins, repentance, and she didn't know any prayers. This is all nonsense, she waved her hand. I remember there are some commandments like, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. I haven't killed anyone in my life, haven't taken what's not mine, so what do I have to repent for? Doris returned home and was surprised to find it empty. Clothes were strewn on the floor, the bed was overturned, kitchen cabinets were open, and there were traces of blood in the hallway. With a heavy sigh, she began to tidy up and didn't realize how time passed until it was past midnight and Adam still hadn't shown up. Exhausted from cleaning, Doris sat down in an armchair, closed her eyes, and fell asleep without turning off the light. She woke up to a persistent knocking on the door. The sun was shining outside, and she only had to go to work in the evening. Opening the door, she saw 2 tall men in black leather jackets on the doorstep, who rudely entered the apartment and walked through it. Well, Mom, haven't lost your little boy yet? One of them asked. I see you've managed to tidy up here. Who are you? Doris asked fearfully. And where's my Adam? Adam, the guys laughed. Your beloved son Adam is with us, and we'll release him when he returns our money. A lot of money. How much? She whispered, and when they named the amount, her eyes darkened. And why does he owe you so much? Your son thought he was smarter than everyone else and wanted to deceive us. And we don't like that, the guys laughed again. So, either he returns the money with interest, or we'll, one of them didn't finish, then looked angrily at the subdued Doris. In short, find the money, or you won't see your son anymore. Got it? But I don't have that kind of money, Doris pleaded with the guys. And I probably won't be able to borrow from anyone. And I won't get a loan, I haven't paid off the previous ones yet. I have nothing, as you can see, she gestured around the room. Adam has already sold everything valuable. One of the guys shook his head. But you have an apartment. Is it registered to you? Seeing Doris nod affirmatively, he continued, so sell it. Those funds will be enough to buy off your son. But then I'll be left with nothing, Doris backed away to the wall. I have no other place to live. Is the apartment more valuable to you than your son? The guy smirked. Well, you've chosen it yourself, he turned and headed for the exit. The other followed suit. Wait, Doris called out. I agree. But I need time to sell it. Release Adam for now, and I'll definitely give you the money, I won't deceive you. No. We'll buy this apartment from you ourselves. Take the documents and let's go to the notary. We'll make the deal, and we'll release your Adam in the evening if you want, of course. Okay, Doris hurried, fetching the apartment documents. Let's go faster, Adam must be very ill with you. The new owner of the apartment gave Doris 2 days to pack her things and leave. All evening, Doris stood in the hallway, listening to the footsteps on the landing, and when she was about to give up hope, she heard a knock on the door. Opening it, she saw Adam, barely able to stand, very pale, and only now did Doris notice how much weight he had lost. Adam, she rushed to him, but her son looked at her with a vacant gaze and, without saying a word, walked into the room, closing the door behind him. When Doris peeked in, he was sleeping on the bed, fully clothed, with his shoes on. She carefully took off his boots and covered him with a blanket. It's okay, Adam, we'll manage somehow. The main thing is that you're alive and with me. She looked at her sleeping son with love and left the room. In the morning, Adam woke up very angry. He had no money, but he desperately wanted his next fix as soon as possible. Mom, give me some money, he barged into the kitchen, where Doris was packing dishes into boxes. And hurry up, I'm starting to feel withdrawal. Adam, but I don't have a penny, Doris looked at her son apologetically. Then borrow from someone, he started to get irritated. Go to the neighbors, to your brothers, or somewhere, but I urgently need money. We already owe money to all the neighbors, Doris continued packing cups. And I'm ashamed to ask Mel and Walter anymore, they have their own families, and how much more can they help us? Just do something, Adam punched the wall in frustration. Don't you understand how bad I feel? Adam, what can I do? Tears streamed from Doris' eyes. Yesterday we lost our apartment because of you, trying to pay off your debts. Let's think about where we'll live now. We have nowhere to go. I don't care where you'll live, Adam narrowed his eyes, glaring at his mother with malice. I'll always find a place for myself, but you can live on the streets for all I care. In fact, that's where you belong if you can't find money for your beloved son. Adam returned to his room and quickly began packing his things into a bag. Adam, where are you going? Doris rushed after her son as he opened the front door. Don't leave me alone, she grabbed his sleeve. I did everything for you, please don't leave. I'll get another job, we'll rent an apartment, and then I'll admit you to a clinic to get you off drugs. Leave me alone, Adam yanked his arm away. Stay out of my life, and don't try to fix me. I'm fine as I am. And I'm tired of your lectures, I don't want to see you anymore. Forget that you have a son and don't look for me. I don't have a mother anymore, he opened the door and slammed it shut loudly behind him. Doris was left alone in the apartment, which no longer belonged to her. She covered her face with her hands and cried. Now she was left without a home and without her beloved son, in whom she had invested her entire life. Without him, she felt she had nothing. She packed only the most essential personal belongings into a bag, leaving the furniture and kitchenware to the new owners. In the morning, she left the apartment and gently closed the door behind her. She didn't go to work, she didn't care if she would be fired or not. Life had lost all meaning for her. She wandered the city for a long time, and when she got tired, she went to the train station to rest in the waiting hall. There were many people around, some waiting for their train, some arriving, but Doris watched it all indifferently. She had no money to go anywhere far, and besides, who needed her? Next to her, a young woman sat down on a bench with a little girl, who looked around in amazement. Mom, when are we going to take the train? The girl impatiently asked her mother. I want to see Dad as soon as possible. Don't worry, Judy, the woman smiled. Soon we'll be in our compartment, and tomorrow morning Daddy will be there to meet us at the station. Judy, it flashed in Doris' mind. How could I forget about her? She's living in house, so there must be a place for me there too. She won't kick her own mother out onto the streets, after all, her grandmother raised her well. That's it, decided. Tomorrow I'll go to the village, I'll find money for a bus ticket. And then I'll apologize to my daughter. After all, I'm not a stranger to her, but her real mother. Doris closed her eyes and smiled, she no longer worried about her future. The bus took Doris to the right stop and drove away, leaving behind clouds of dust. Oh, it's been so long since I've been here, she looked around, and her heart beat happily. Approaching the house, she noticed a lock on the door. Doris rummaged under the porch, searching for the key. Her mother usually left it there, but she found nothing. She walked around the yard, peeked into the shed, surprised to find everything tidy. Doris went out through the gate, sat on the bench, and closed her eyes. Wow, has Doris graced us with her presence? She heard a nearby female voice. How many years has it been since you were here? Doris opened her eyes and stared with surprise at the old woman, whose face seemed familiar. Don't you recognize me? I'm your neighbor, Sue. We were friends with your late mother. Oh, hello, Sue, Doris lazily replied. How are you doing? I'm fine. Why did you come? Did you miss your daughter? Or did you decide to see your grandchildren, whom you've never met? Grandchildren? Doris was surprised, then remembered that Mel had mentioned something about them. Yes, she nodded, I finally found the time and decided to come for a visit. Maybe I'll stay here for good, keep an eye on the grandkids. I bet Judy finds it hard to manage them alone. Why alone? Sue asked in surprise. The kids go to daycare, and Judy's husband is very helpful. They're respected in the village, Chad and Judy. What do they do that's so good if everyone respects them? Doris smirked. Well, Chad teaches math at our school and tutors students on the side, while Judy teaches first graders. I see, Doris furrowed her brow, so she's become a teacher. Are you going to visit your mother's grave? Sue suddenly asked, looking intently at Doris. You've never been there, not even for the funeral. Are you upset with her? It's wrong. A mother is still a mother. Norma was very worried about you, even though she didn't show it. She just kept saying, what a fool you turned out to be. And why didn't you bring your son? He must have grown up by now. It's wrong for siblings not to talk to each other. Adam is very busy. Doris's mood immediately soured at the question, and she stood up from the bench. I'll take a walk around the village, see how people live here, maybe bump into someone I know. Go ahead, dear, go, Sue quickly nodded. Everyone's at work now, but maybe you'll see someone. Doris walked along the street for a while, then returned to the house and, entering the yard, sat on the porch. What are you doing here? She looked up and saw a man standing in front of her, looking sternly at her. I think I've seen you somewhere, just can't remember where. Oh, son-in-law, Doris stood up and smiled at Chad. I came to visit you, missed you, and wanted to see the grandchildren. So you're Judy's mother? Chad's gaze remained stern. Come inside, Judy will be back soon, she went to pick up our kids from daycare. No, I'd rather wait here, Doris waved her hands. I'll sit here, get some fresh air. Well, suit yourself, Chad shrugged and unlocked the door, entering the house. After some time, the gate opened, and first, a little boy rushed into the yard, followed by a 5-year-old girl. Last came Judy, holding a small briefcase. Seeing the unfamiliar woman, the children stopped in the middle of the yard and looked at her in surprise. Oh, you little ones. Doris reached out to them. Hurry, go to your grandma, I'll give you a big hug. Norma and Timothy turned around, looked at their mother, and stayed in place. Go inside, Judy gently nudged them. And I'll talk to this, she couldn't find the right words, and I'll come to you too. The children cautiously walked past Doris and ran onto the porch. Hello, daughter, Doris said, deliberately affectionate. Here we are, reunited. How I missed you. Why did you come? Judy didn't react to her words. Don't lie and say you missed me. I won't believe it. I wanted to see the grandchildren, Doris said. I've never seen them before. Do you even know their names? Judy smirked. I'll repeat it again, speak up about why you came, don't waste my time, I still need to make dinner. I have nowhere to live, Doris lowered her head. I lost the apartment because of Adam's debts. I had nowhere else to go, so I thought of you. You won't turn away your own mother, will you? Oh, I see, Judy laughed. If your life were going well, you still wouldn't think of me. But when things go wrong, you remember your dear daughter, whom you abandoned as a baby. And what about your son, Adam? Doesn't he help you? Go to him and live with him, or does he not want you? It's because of Adam that I lost the apartment, Doris lowered her head even further. To pay off the debts. He's very sick, needed money for medication. You're lying again, Judy grimaced. I know your Adam is a drug addict, you've been supporting him all your life, and apparently even sold the apartment to save your beloved son. And now, to avoid being on the streets, you came to me, hoping that seeing mother, I would forgive everything, invite her in, and we would all live together happily ever after. Doris stood silently, afraid to look her daughter in the eye. But you, dear mother, are mistaken, Judy continued. There's no place for you in my home or in my heart. I've lived my whole life without you, Norma was both a mother and a father to me, for which I am very grateful. So you won't give me a place? Doris glared at her daughter. You'll leave me on the streets? You're the kind of person, Judy sighed, who's never satisfied with anything. You'll start imposing your rules here, making decisions, and then you might even bring your Adam here. But I want to live peacefully with my husband, raise our children with the care and love I never received from you. Neither I nor the grandchildren are of any use to you, you're only interested in us for your own gain. So, you can leave now, I don't have any more time to talk to you. Judy opened the door, went inside, and slammed it shut behind her. Doris stood in the middle of the yard for a while, looking at the windows, hoping that Judy would change her mind, but not a single curtain even twitched. She slowly walked out through the gate and trudged along the road, hoping to catch a ride, as she had no money for a ticket to go back. Judy, don't you think you were too harsh on your mother? Chad approached his wife and hugged her. Maybe we should have sympathized with her, and we have plenty of space in our home. Maybe I can still catch up with her. No, Judy shook her head. No one saw my tears when I cried into my pillow, desperately envying my friends who had mothers and fathers. I'll never forget Norma's hands, which, without sparing her health, worked to feed me. And I still remember the emotional pain I felt from knowing that my own mother didn't want me. Do you really think that's forgivable? But in this life, you have to pay for everything. I hope my mother will think about what she's done not only to her life but also to mine and Adam's life. Maybe when she comes to us next time, we'll talk to her, and maybe I'll forgive her, at least for the sake of our children's future, so they can have a caring and loving grandmother. And if that doesn't happen, well, she shrugged, God will judge her. Norma, Timothy, she affectionately called the children, let's go to the table, we still have a lot to do. Returning to the city, Doris wandered the streets for a while, and her feet led her to the church she had visited before. The service had long ended, but Doris still entered and saw the priest, who was attentively paging through a thick book in a dark cover. Excuse me, Doris approached him, I would like to confess. The priest looked at her in surprise. To do that, my daughter, you need to prepare yourself seriously. But if you want to talk to me, I'm ready to listen. Sighing, Doris told him about her daughter, whom she had left with her mother and had not been interested in since, and about her son, who had become a drug addict, and how she had lost her only home because of him. The priest listened attentively, without interrupting, while Doris kept talking and talking. It was already quite dark outside when she finished her story. Here's what, the priest said after some thought. Come with me to my home. My wife will feed you, put you to bed, and in the morning, we'll try to solve your problems. God will not abandon you, He is strict but fair. You've already started on the path of repentance, which means your soul has begun to purify. Doris indeed felt a sense of relief, and she also promised herself that she would definitely try to repair her relationship with her daughter in an attempt to help her son, not through excessive maternal love, but through support, so that her son could become independent and make decisions on his own. Of course, if it wasn't already